I gotta turn it off. Okay, just the space. We're going down to 2 minutes? Yeah. Okay.
I've been giving away my
Activity y'all have tonight.
So I just came from bingo, and then I'm coming back to go to the very excited.
You participate?
Yes, the lipstick got on my hands just waiting a couple. I said I didn't know I need to do bingo because we had a bunch of prizes.
Listen to it on YouTube.
Extra credit. You get extra credits.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to our September the 28th board meeting. Before we get started, we will say the prayer and the pledge, and you want to go ahead and introduce our person for the pledge? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I am very excited tonight to be able to introduce Ella Rollins. Ella is the student body president at Eastside High School. She is an exceptional student who embodies what it means to be a student leader. She has worked with her school administration to provide student support for Eastside 101, an orientation experience for all freshmen and new students. Along with other members of student government, Ella has helped lead tours for open house events, works closely with Central Spirit to organize pep rallies and other school spirit activities, and she has worked tirelessly this fall to plan Spirit Week events. I can attest to that. My children are there right now. To raise money for Switch, an organization in South Carolina that is working very hard to end human sex trafficking. So Ella, thank you for being here tonight, and we will let you lead the pledge.
Will everyone please stand and remain standing while Dr. Stiles says the prayer tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we pray. Gracious God, thank you for this beautiful autumn day and the endless blessings you have bestowed upon us. Thank you for the opportunity to serve our students, parents, teachers, staff, administration, and community. We humbly pray for your presence in our midst this evening. Calm our minds and bring comfort to our hearts as we face and navigate challenging times in our nation. We seek you and ask for guidance, wisdom, and support in all that we do and speak. Grant us clear minds and peaceful hearts as we gather. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion. Allow us to grow closer as a group and nurture the bonds of community among us. Fill us with a measure of grace as we make decisions that are in the best interest of our children and our communities. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Rollins and Dr. Stiles. Our next item on the agenda is adoption of the consent calendar. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed to the motion say nay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda will be appearance of visitors. We have 15 visitors tonight. The time allotted will be 3 minutes each, no more than 3 minutes. And we ask you, as quick as the buzzer goes off, you 3 minutes to be seated so that we can call the next speaker up so that we can get through this. The board has only allowed us 1 hour to speak, and so we want to get everyone through if we can. First person on the agenda is Jason Simon.
Good? Yes, sir. I'm a very concerned parent of 3 district students. I'd like to begin by referring to your duties and responsibilities as members of this board, specifically your oath of office. Quote, I do solemnly swear that I am duly qualified according to the Constitution of this state to exercise the duties of this office to which I have been elected. That I will, to the best of my ability, discharge the duties, therefore, and preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of this state of the United States, so help me God, end quote. As stated within the South Carolina School Boards Association manual, you must keep students the focus of our schools. You must adopt a shared vision based on community beliefs to guide local education. You must report district progress to the community. You must ensure that long and short-term plans are developed and revised through a process of extensive participation, information gathering, research, and reflection. As per your ethical principles, you pledge to represent the interest of this entire district when making decisions and must rely on all available facts, your own judgment rather than on individual or shared interest groups such as DHEC. You pledge to seek regular communications between the board, and all segments of the community. You pledge to make our educational setting the best possible to encourage all students to achieve and love learning. When you took this binding oath, you made pledges. You agreed to speak and vote with conscience, but to also support the majority decisions. I'd like now to refer to my rights and duties as a parent in the state of South Carolina Code of Law. Quote, the mother and father are the joint natural guardians of their minor children and are equally charged with the welfare and education of their minor children. It also states that it is unlawful for a person who has charge or custody of a child to place the child in unreasonable risk or harm affecting the child's life, physical or mental health or safety. I ask tonight if you believe that you're upholding these core values and ethical principles when it comes to the best interest education of our children, as well as respecting the rights and duties of their parents to protect their welfare, education, safety, and health. I have no greater passion in my life than protecting my children from any harm, wrongdoing, especially when it comes to their education, physical, and mental health. As a parent, I never thought I would have to protect my children from unreasonable risks, such as the ones this school board has imposed in their educational setting. Now that I've clearly established our duties, rights, and responsibilities as public servants and parents, my wife will move on to the major issue at hand, contact tracing and quarantine of our healthy students. Thank you for your time.
Before we go to the second speaker, I forgot the script for the public comments. I'm sorry. I'll ask the secretary to read this. Thank you, Dr. Stiles.
As each speaker's name is called, he or she should proceed to the podium at the end of the board's dais where there is a microphone and light system. Each speaker will be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak to the board. The light system will be green at the start and will turn yellow when 1 minute remains on the speaker's allotted time. In keeping with board policy KCA, abusive language or personal attacks aimed at students or staff members will not be permitted. All speakers are expected to behave in an orderly and respectful manner. The board will not engage in discussion with the speaker or respond to comments. The superintendent will designate a member of the staff to respond to each speaker in an appropriate and timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. Our second speaker is Kelly Simon.
Good evening. On September 13th, Union County, North Carolina led by example when board members voted 8-1 to dissolve their contact tracing program. This effort will allow healthy students to remain in school. Students with symptoms who test positive for COVID must abide by a quarantine protocol. Keeping our healthy children in school allows them face-to-face learning, interaction with teachers, participation in clubs and sports, and gives them access to the mental health programs you deemed as necessary. It keeps student morale and love of learning high. This is happening in counties and entire states across our country. A recent survey by Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security finds many are winding down their contact tracing programs because research shows it is not helping. It has become a waste of resources and overwhelming for most districts, including our own. In the first 20 days of this school year, my children have missed a combined total of 25 days. One of my children has completed 2 quarantines. None of them have ever showed signs or symptoms of COVID. When dealing with separate schools during these events, I was told time and again that their hands are tied because of how backed up the district is. Where is your continued data showing contact tracing is benefiting our children? Where is your proof that forcing healthy students to stay home quarantined is not harming them educationally or mentally? I'd like to see updated numbers and facts related to your procedures, your quarantining of healthy students, as well as the benefits you're seeing in masking our bus riding children. As a parent of district students, I do not agree with or accept these mandates until I see evidence that it is benefiting my children in their education, physical and mental health, and safety. Furthermore, I'd like to remind you of H4208, a bill to provide a procedure for recalling and removing from office members of the Board of Trustees of the School District of Greenville County, including requirements for a recall election initiated through a recall petition. If a majority of parents decide that you are in violation of your oath of office and that your decisions do not have our children's best interest at heart, we will be taking action through recall petition. I'd also like to remind you all that any person that violates my rights and duties as a parent by placing my child at unreasonable risk of harm affecting their life, physical or mental health or safety is guilty of a felony, and for each offense must be fined at the discretion of the court or imprisoned for no more than 10 years or both. I've emailed each of you a copy of our statements here tonight, as well as all our cited sources. Thank you.
Alicia Simon. Alicia Simon.
Hello, I'm a fourth grader at Oakview Elementary. Tonight I want to tell you about how your contact tracing is affecting my school year. Last year, I only missed a couple days of school. I made it my goal this year to have perfect attendance. I was really excited because I got the best teacher. At first, I didn't know anyone in my class at all, but now I've made some good friends. During the second week of school, contact tracing ruined my chances of having perfect attendance. I had to miss a few days of school. I had not been around anyone with COVID, and I had no symptoms. My parents kept calling the school and the district, but they were too busy to get to me. When we finally got the call that I could go back, I realized I had a pile of work to make up. I missed my friend's birthday, my spelling test, and my favorite special, gym. While I was at home, I was not sent any work, so it was confusing when I got back to school. I chose to do in-person school because I love to learn, ask questions, be a part of my class, and have a chance to see my friends. I had to work extra hard to keep my straight A's. I felt like I was being punished, like I did something wrong. It felt unfair. It's really hard to have teams and groups at school now because we never know when half the class will have to stay home for weeks. I really wanted to join a club this year, but I didn't because it's just another thing I'll be forced to miss. At last month's board meeting, I told you that adults can just get vaccinated if they want to. Adults can also make their kids wear a mask or do virtual school if they're so afraid of COVID. I am not afraid. Why are you punishing me? Just a kid that just wants to learn, a kid that wanted a perfect attendance. I think that contact tracing is really ruining this school year for my classmates, my teachers, and for me. If this is something you support, I ask you to reconsider. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Simon. Next speaker is Judith Tenzola, and would everyone please speak into the microphone? They're having a little problem hearing out there.
Is it working? Test it.
I'm Judith Tenzola from Simpsonville, who spoke from this podium last month concerning social emotional learning and critical race theory. Let the record show I sent each trustee, both by email and U.S. mail, 5 questions concerning this subject and requested answers by tonight's meeting. The most important being, did you vote in favor of incorporating SEL in Greenville County schools? Thanks to trustees Stiles, Mosley, and Bush for answering. I assumed that elected public officials would respond. I was wrong. Trustees Doolin, Goodwin, Leventis, Wells, Lewis, Meek, Morrison, Fair, Sailors, Wells, and Sudith, who represents my area of 18, failed to send a response. Are we to assume it is acceptable that our trustees ignore legitimate correspondence from parents and taxpayers? I'll answer question 5 for the trustees. On May 8th, 2018, at a special called board meeting to approve the strategic education plan for 2018 to 23, which included SEL, the motion was carried with aye votes from then trustees Bush, Lewis, Meek, Morrison, Fair, Saylor, Sudith, Wells, and Goodwin. Remember those names. It's imperative that we know who agreed to SEL. We who attend these meetings do not intend to make it an us against you, the school board. We're here for the sole purpose of the education and well-being of the young people in our community, from those who have just blown out 5 candles on a birthday cake to those who walk across the stage trying to balance a mortarboard and tassel on their heads. We're family-oriented Americans who know right from wrong, good from evil, and use everyday common sense to live our lives, and that is what we expect of our oath-taking officials. With SEL, why instill in children a politically correct value system? Why have you included this book, Woke, a Young Poet's Call to Justice, in our schools? A clearly CRT-slanted book encouraging activism to middle schoolers. SEL is a divisive issue, like a spreading tidal wave from coast to coast. One time, school was an edifice where we crossed the threshold to learn to read, write, and do math, and we were all treated and learned the golden rule. The present lexicon includes the term opt-out. With that effort put into securing SEL that you made, make the same effort to allow parents to voice their opinions against the board's approval and give their children a viable way to opt out without
Thank you, Ms. Tenzola.
or duress.
Thank you. Next speaker's Lynn Brown.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. First, I want to say that this whole last year and a half has totally confused me because not once have I ever picked a friend based on the color of their skin, ever. And most of my friends are of different ethnicities. I pick them on their character. So this whole thing of separating people by race is ridiculous. I want to read to you what I think a lot of you have forgotten. This is part of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's us. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to then shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. By the way, this is Joseph Stalin. He was once a hip intellectual atheist and Democrat socialist that led protests against the rich and powerful. He rose to power promising equality, then took over private industry, leading to mass poverty and famine. He killed 20 million of his own people. And as far as treating the vaxxed different from the unvaxxed, do you realize that if you've been vaccinated, you can't give plasma? But if you have antibodies, you can? Do you realize that there is nobody has made exceptions for people who have antibodies? It's either vaxxed or unvaxxed. The Army flight surgeon of commands said to the Secretary of Defense that all injected pilots and flight crews be grounded for the risk of cardiac arrest in flight while carrying personnel or munitions. And there are 3 pulmonary embolisms in ICU within 48 hours of getting the jab at Fort Hood, Texas. Canadian Times says all vaccinated people must quarantine over winter months or risk serious illness, and this was by the London Times, World Health Organization, European Advisory Group. And in Nazi Germany, people had to have a health pass. We don't live in Nazi Germany.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Next speaker is Peggy Purcell.
Hello, good evening. I'm a recently retired nurse after 42 years. I have 2 daughters in Greenville County. They're both fabulous school teachers, and moms like to brag. And I brought a letter from my daughter. She has 2 of hers at piano tonight, really wanted to come. This is from my younger daughter that is also married to a elementary Greenville County school teacher. And between the 2 of them, they realized that if they are required to get a vaccine from the school district, they said, bring it on because we are going to lose our home. And it's okay because we're ready for it. We're making plans already ahead of time. But I wanted Greenville County School to know that you will lose some of the most greatest teachers. Statewide last year, 3rd grade, she teaches math. 3rd grade, statewide, 36% passing. Greenville County School, 41.1. I just looked it up online. Her class was 84%. Good evening. I have 3 boys in Greenville County schools. One is in middle school, and 2 are in elementary school, and I'm a teacher, and I'm in my 19th year of teaching. As a mom, I need to say that virtual does not work for any of my boys. Their individual needs are not being met. With having 3 boys in all different grade levels, my boys were in quarantine for months, and not one time was one of my boys ever sick. I have concerned, at our school we have a COVID committee, and I have concerns with the board transparency with our COVID committee. Who nominated these members? It seems the board creates committees and then nominates themselves. And what is the role of this COVID committee? This committee is following actual data at the school? Are there other people that are represented in this? 169 students and 17 staff members recently were quarantined. Contact your governor. I find this to be fear-mongering. When I asked about our number of positive cases, I was told we only had 5 positive cases, with some of those kids from having it before school even started. I choose to send my boys to school because I know that that's where they learn the best, despite the possibility that they can catch a virus, for which they have a 99.98% chance of survival rate. We have masked our children, making it hard to hear, be heard, learn phonics. They cannot see smiles, no touching, don't play at recess, working in isolation with less of a group work, no hugs. Virtually learning is an utter failure, and the mental health interventions are up 24% for ages 5 to 11 and 30
Thank you, Ms. Purcell.
12 to 17-year-olds.
Thank you.
I am frustrated.
Thank you. Next speaker, will you say your name, please?
Leo Kumovich.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. It has been my dilemma on what I needed to address this evening. I could have came up here and regurgitated the facts, as many have done so already, but unfortunately it seems like most of you here, facts go into one ear and out the other ear. In reality, most of you here don't care about the facts. So I will make this short. I just wanted to let everyone here know that you are in violation of human rights. It is wrong to quarantine, contact trace, and possibly in the future, coerce children by bribery to get their COVID vaccination. This pandemic has been nothing but lies and corruption at its highest. Shame on you for dragging children through this. The scientific field is riddled with corruption and propaganda. Let's not fall back into science tells us. This is not science. CDC does not provide science but coercion to fill someone's pockets. Whose hands are clean from this corruption? Whose hands are clean from taking taxpayer funds to fatten pockets? Enough is enough. Let's stop playing these back and forth games and get back to normalcy, because your decisions are hurting children. Not only will you be answering to God, but you will be answering to we the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Abigail Hendricks.
Out of over 10,000 students in Greenville County that have been made to quarantine, less than 5% have contracted the virus and been moved to isolation. We are fully aware of the exemption list and the statutes that pertain to DHEC. But in DHEC's issued interim guidance that they've given you at the bottom of page 4 under layered strategies, it does give this board the authority and permission to change those strategies. I urge you to stop contact tracing in public schools and stop paying for it using our taxpayers' money that is needed for education. There is no law or rule that compels you. According to the statutes of law, it is DHEC's job to do the investigation of close contacts. It is not our obligation to pay for it. As a taxpayer, I would like to know how much we are spending this year to do DHEC's job. Everyone's made a lot of self-sacrifice for the benefit of the community, But someone's personal medical concerns and fears should not be placed on the shoulders of our children. Parents have the option to do virtual schooling, and there are added testing sites for staff and students, which I think is a wonderful achievement that you've made. Thank you for that. And fortunately, we have the ability to get vaccinated, and if we can't, there are ways of protecting yourself by wearing an N95 mask. In South Carolina, we have medical and religious exemptions, but DHEC's recommendations force children to either wear a mask or get vaccinated, or they are punished. How do you think it feels to these children that are being singled out for personal and private things and sent home and not receiving an education? I can tell you how it feels because it happened to my son. He was frantic when he was pulled out and asked about personal medical information, a minor, being asked about his medical information while he was being pulled into the office. Do you think it's appropriate to place your staff in this compromising and jeopardizing position with their students? Furthermore, it's opening the door for the school to incur legal actions and violations for HIPAA, state law, and discrimination. When you joined this board, what was your motivation? What did you want to have done with our children? By electing to exercise DHEC's policies, was this the vision that you had for serving our community? Have you thought about the implications of who you give power to if you change it from the parent to DHEC? It's of critical importance of how you use this power because it has an immediate impact on kids now, and there are long-term consequences by taking power away from the community and transferring it to government organizations.
Thank you. Next speaker, Mark Roberts.
Good evening. My name is Mark Roberts. I'm a chemical engineering professor at Clemson with a PhD from Stanford University. I have published many research articles with nearly 7,000 collective citations. I teach how to interpret data and form conclusions. My position is not one of politics, but grounded in science. I came here today to urge you to stop contact tracing in schools. It's DHEC's job to investigate close contacts, not the schools. There's no law that compels you to comply. I was told that you try to follow their guidance as close as possible for liability and concerns about the spread. However, DHEC's guidance says that students are to wear masks if they return from quarantine early. They also say that vaccinated students who are close contacts should wear masks for 14 days, but you ignore these. And we know that vaccinated students can get infected and infect others. Your contact tracing is discriminatory and it's not based on science. The overwhelming majority of students in quarantine who are there because you choose to investigate close contacts are healthy. These students suffer from a 30% increase in mental health issues and learning loss due to excessive absences, and this is being affected or reflected in test scores across the state. I don't have the current numbers for the district, but on September 7th, the Greenville News reported that 2,329 students were in quarantine, 375 isolating. This is double the number that were in quarantine at the peak last year when there were significantly higher COVID cases. We have more information, access to vaccines and masks, yet somehow we're moving backwards. The New York Times reported a study about close contact in quarantine in the schools. They showed that the number of close contacts in quarantine who later tested positive for COVID was only 2%. This means that if 1,000 students in Greenville are in quarantine, only about 20 might be infected. 2% is what you would expect the normal rate for anybody. We cannot conclude that contact tracing does anything at all to reduce the spread in school. All research coming out is showing this. Before you didn't know, and I can assume that you had our kids' best interests at stake, but now you know, and now is the time to act. DHEC's quarantine guidelines are not based on science, so I implore you to get them to change them immediately or do what you can to protect our kids. Since the start of the school year, I would like to know how many students who have been forced to quarantine and how many of these have had a positive test for COVID within the next 5 to 10 days. If the answer is not significantly higher than the rate anyone would get infected normally, your voluntary compliance with contact tracing is hurting students for no benefit. None of you in front of me should be proud of yourselves today. Just today, you reduced the number of COVID-infected students by about 0 by forcing thousands of healthy students to stay home. I pray that you can find the courage to do what's right, and get these kids back in school. Other schools are going away with contact tracing. So should we. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is James Brandy or Brandier.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good evening. On March 23rd, I spoke to you about the AP reading list at Malden High School. On May 24th, I submitted 4 requests for reconsideration of instructional materials for books that were used during the 2020-2021 school year at Malden High School. I was told that the Material Review Committee would render a decision on these 4 books by September 30th. I look forward to hearing the official findings by Thursday. At the school committee of the whole meeting on May 11th, Mr. McCoy presented a slide that stated teachers have the autonomy to find materials that hold the interest of their students and represent all students. The material must be age appropriate. If the teachers have the autonomy to select materials with no oversight or accountability, who is making sure the material selections are meeting the 7-point requirements in district policy IFA? Also at the committee of the whole meeting, Mr. McCoy was asked if I was accurate in what I stated in May and were the books really that bad. To paraphrase his answer, those books are on our suggested reading list that the teacher chose. That answer was not really an answer to the question, but yes, the books I referenced are that bad. Mr. McCoy was also asked if I'm reading a book and I don't agree with that view, but I know there's another view out there, can I get that? He answered yes, and as a matter of fact, the teacher asked the parent if he had a book with any viewpoint to propose, she would be happy to look at it. What the teacher really told me was that I was free to select another book from the list that was provided. I was not told I could propose another book for the assignment. There are no other books on the current list with opposing viewpoints. I would like to know why, as a resident of Greenville County, I would be charged a fee of anywhere from $300 to $500 to request to see what reading lists are being used at each of the remaining district high schools. We have the right to know what is being taught at each school. State Senator Shane Martin helped me obtain the reading list from each high school on August 10th. A quick review showed the list for Riverside, Woodmont, and Malden did not match what individuals from these schools had provided me. This shows me that there is no control over what is being taught in the classrooms. Giving the teachers the independence to add whatever they wish is completely unacceptable. We need a transparent method of choosing teaching materials that allows for public scrutiny before being taught. We cannot leave the selection up to each individual teacher. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Daniel Natal.
Hi, my name is Daniel Natal, and I have 2 teenage children. And this is just a data point. I just want this to go into the back of your minds. Back in the 1970s, you probably have already heard about this. Dr. Philip Zimbardo, he did a famous study, the Stanford prison experiment, and it was to see how authoritarian states happen. And so what he did was he randomly got students, half of them were wardens, half of them were prisoners, and he noticed that their behavior changed according to a costume that they were given. And he said people's aggression can also increase when they feel anonymous. For example, when they wear a uniform, hood, or mask. You minimize social responsibility. Nobody knows who you are, so therefore you're not individually liable. There is also a group effect when you are masked. It provides a fear in other people because they can't see you, and you lose your humanity. So losing touch with your humanity is something that's very important when you're a little kid and you're neurologically plastic. You can be changed. And they've noticed, social scientists have noticed that kids who don't get facial interaction, certain parts of their brains don't form, like little kids in Romanian orphanages and stuff, and they become stunted. They become sociopathic. And so there was a book by Lydia Denworth, who's a social scientist, and she says, in page 54, from birth, the monkeys were not exposed to a face, human or non-human. Their caregivers wore welding masks when they interacted with young monkeys. For the record, the animals had lots of attention, activity, and toys. They were well-nourished and lovingly bottle-fed as infants. The only thing their world lacked was faces. Using fMRI, Livingstone showed in 2017 that if the monkeys had zero experiences looking at faces, the parts of their brains that should have been dedicated to that task did not develop the skill. And then she adds, thankfully, however, human babies are not raised by people wearing welding masks and do in fact see faces from the beginning. The book was published 2 years before COVID. So my point here is to point out that this is having neurological effects when children don't have the ability to develop empathy by seeing facial expressions and social cues. And there was leading up to this, even before COVID, Dr. Michelle Borba, who was at the University of Michigan. She said that college students are 40% less empathetic compared to their peers 30 years ago. Meanwhile, the level of narcissism has increased 58%. So that was just because of technology. People are becoming more closed off. They're becoming less empathetic. And then throw masks on top of that. What I want to leave you with is the fact that when we started schools, the main function of that was character formation. The main function was not vocational. It was not teaching them math and science. It was originally character formation. It was ethics and virtue. 30 years from now, when we have a bumper crop of sociopaths, remember that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mitzi Adams. Mitzi Adams.
Hello, my name is Mitzi Adams, and I have a son in the 3rd grade at A.J. Wittenberg. The last normal school year was when he was in kindergarten. Principal Spratt started off this school year in a positive and productive way for our kids. He came in an impossible time. In the age of COVID, everyone seems to be unhappy with something. Trying to make life go back to business as usual is almost an impossibility. But Mr. Spratt has done an amazing job making it as normal as possible in an abnormal time. He is outside every morning helping with the car line, and not only does he know every kid's name, but he is genuinely happy to see and greet them with a big, warm smile. Last week, Principal Spratt was unexpectedly put on leave because of a post from almost 10 years ago. He was removed from doing his job the same week our son was in the unjust quarantine. The person we were relying on for information on how to navigate these uncharted waters were removed during a time we needed him most. We needed his leadership, but more importantly, A.J. Wittenberg needs his leadership. Our society has spiraled down a dangerous rabbit hole where people are more worried about hypothetical outrage and not worried about the consequences of destroying someone's career, reputation, and livelihood. It is psychologically twisted to overreact to something that was written almost a decade ago. This false outrage needs to end. No one is going to be hurt by a post from almost a decade ago. And if something does offend you from that long ago, then maybe you were the problem. I am far more outraged by the person that decided to hunt down anything that could be construed as offensive or insensitive when their objective was to maliciously slander this man, all without knowing the context or what precipitated the post in the first place. Mr. Spratt came from a Title I school and is at a school with a large percentage of the population is economically disadvantaged. So I think he would be anything but insensitive. I think it is very short-sighted to remove a key school leader at this time without more to go on. It seems that any legitimate background check would have turned this up during the hiring process if it was indeed something truly controversial. It also would seem a think tank of PhDs at the district office could make a decision in 10 minutes on whether it is bad enough to fire the guy or keep him. No need to drag him and his family through the mud. This isn't about standing up for Mr. Spratt. It is about standing up for decency, standing up against the keyboard mafia and the false outrage used to justify rage. But most importantly, it is about showing people that they deserve grace. As a parent, I am far more concerned with if Principal Spratt can do his job and keep our kids safe, happy, and healthy. From what I have seen, he excels at this position. It would be a shame to lose a great principal.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Next speaker is Seth Rogers. Oh, I'm sorry. What's?
Seth Rogers.
Okay.
Good evening. Previous speaker mentioned one purpose of education being character formation. I would say another one is learning the ability to differentiate truth and fiction. Therefore, schools and school boards need to be deeply committed to truth in their policies. Unfortunately, most people are too focused on themselves, distracted, or lazy to put in the work to figure out truth for themselves. We have allowed the confusion around us to become an excuse for not figuring out what's true. Many hide behind the false claim that we simply can't know. In this way, we're like Pilate, who retorted, "What is truth?" as if Pilate didn't know whether Jesus was guilty or not. He did. We can know what's true. Just like we need to teach our kids true history, true health science, true grammar, true whatever, policy decisions concerning those same educational institutions need to be based on truth, real data, not anyone's preferences or popular opinion. In this statement, I would like to exhort the board to question the big assumption on which all of the controversial and harmful COVID mitigation measures are based, and that is asymptomatic transmission. Masks, lockdowns, quarantines, plexiglasses, whatever, they're all based on the premise that, number one, you just can't know if you're sick, and number two, even if you're outwardly healthy, you can be a, quote, carrier, end quote, and make others sick as if a virus behaved the same way as a recessive gene. The truth is, you do know if you're sick, and you will not make others sick if you're healthy. If the virus was so contagious, why do we test for it by jamming a stick in your nose and rubbing against your brain? According to a lawsuit against the US Secretary of Health and Human Services back in July, quote, there is no credible scientific evidence that demonstrates that the phenomenon of asymptomatic spread is real. Even Fauci has said asymptomatic transmission is rare, and researchers in China concluded it to be almost, quote, non-existent. Therefore, with asymptomatic transmission dispelled, you cannot support quarantines, nor masks, nor any other COVID mitigation measures that are based on this faulty assumption or that are based on the faulty PCR test. With children being at extremely low risk from COVID, and with the flu, they definitely have a higher risk, yet we didn't take any of these measures with the flu. And essentially, with children being so poor at transmitting the virus to others, there is absolutely no reason for quarantines, masks, plexiglasses, etc. in our schools. And one final question.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker.
Because so much hinges on it.
Ms. Rogers, your time's up. Next speaker is Judy Tenzola. Or Jody Tenzola.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jody Tenzola. I'm a mother of 4 GCS students at various schools in Blue Ridge area, Blue Ridge High, Blue Ridge Middle, and Skyline Elementary. 8 days into this school year, my 6th grader was sent home to quarantine due to close contact with a COVID positive individual. 2 weeks in, my 8th grader was also sent home to quarantine due to close contact. The administrator called me around 2:15 and said I needed to come pick her up from school. My 8th grader is on the volleyball team, and she had a game that day at 5:30, so I asked, do I need to come pick her up this instant? He said, no, she's not a threat right now, so you can just pick her up in Carline, which, would be around 3:30 in her case. Then I said, so she can't play in her game tonight? He said, no. I said, so she isn't a threat right now, but she will be in 2 hours? He had nothing to say except that he was just doing what he had to do. Both of my girls served their quarantine time at home, in which they never got sick. It was a waste of the administrator's time figuring out who was close to who. It was a waste of my children's time in education, sitting at home doing busy work with no instructional time, completely healthy. I have talked to numerous parents whose children also have had to quarantine due to close contact, only to never get sick and waste their time, and inconvenience working parents that need to put food on their tables. When are we going to wake up and realize that coronavirus is a virus and it's here to stay? No experimental injection or masks are going to make it disappear. We have got to start treating COVID like the flu. The CDC's website clearly states, and I quote, students, teachers, and staff should stay home when they have signs of any infectious illness. Neither of my daughters had signs of infectious illness, so I should not have had to keep them home. DHEC does not have the right to run our lives, but they sure will if we let them. So I'm here today to fight for my children and the children of parents who can't be here tonight, and all of the school teachers and other staff who all feel that the quarantine of healthy people is absurd. We need to overthrow DHEC's tyrannical guidelines and follow the lead that Union County, North Carolina, and the whole state of Florida has taken under Governor DeSantis. He has now done away with healthy quarantining. I'll leave you with a quote from Governor DeSantis in the Washington Post. It stated, "Quarantining students who appear healthy is incredibly damaging for their educational advancement."
Thank you. Our next speaker is Angela Laird.
Hello there, my name is Angela Laird, and I did speak last month as a parent. This week, I am also speaking as a parent, but I wanted to let you know I'm also a substitute teacher for Greenville County Schools, and I have experience firsthand in the classroom what is actually happening to these kids. I will tell you that I've been in the classroom where a vaccinated child and an unvaccinated child have been taken out of my classroom, only to have the vaccinated child return and the unvaccinated child go into the holding room and wait for their parent to pick them up. I think any one of us in this room would say that's a disgrace. Okay? These kids are being punished and discriminated against because they're not vaccinated. I don't know about anybody else, but if you see the data on the reproductive system, I don't know why anyone would put that in their child. Okay? The other part is that right now I have a very close friend of mine whose son is 13 years old. He's completely healthy, and he is vaccinated, unvaccinated, and he is home on quarantine. The problem is he's doing all of his work through Google Classroom. Okay? No instruction. He's teaching himself for 10 days. There's nothing wrong with him. Why are we doing this to our children? Why is this okay? I've been in Greenville for 17 years now. When I first came here, my son was a freshman, one of my children. I have 4. One of my children, I would raise my sister's son. He's a little older. A freshman. He was due to go to the old Woodmont High School. Remember that? On 25. Graduation rate under 50%. I wasn't sending him there. They moved it to Woodmont, the new Woodmont, right? Why are we going backwards, Greenville? We were not good 17 years ago. Our school system was horrible. It is wonderful. It is wonderful now. Why are we going to go backwards and ruin that? Our numbers were high. Our kids were doing great. You know how many smart kids came out of that school? Scholarships all over the place. I had a child, an 8th grader, more than one, who can't subtract and multiply 2-digit numbers. Guys, this is real. I had a 5th grader who couldn't tell me the days of the week and couldn't spell them. This is really happening to our kids. Why are we letting that happen? I love where I live in Greenville. I love it. And I want it to stay that way, and I want our education systems to stay that way. But by quarantining our kids, we're not doing there's no benefit to it for these kids, none. Why aren't those teachers doing Zoom meetings into their home and at least including them? If you have to quarantine, at least do that. They're not. They're not learning anything.
Thank you, Ms. Laird. Thank you. That ends our visitor presentation. We're going to break in place for about 2 minutes to give everybody an opportunity. If you want to exit, go ahead and do that. We'll give you a couple of minutes.
Did anybody find a hair thing?
I did.
It was loud. Roger has it on.
I got it on.
I know.
Okay, let us resume our meeting. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. I do not have a formal report tonight, so I'll defer back to you to the action items.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, 5.01, naming of Carolina High School. The recommended motion coming from the committee of the whole does not need a second, is to approve the naming of the gymnasium at Carolina High School for Betty Moore. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 5.02. The recommended motion from the committee of the whole does not need a second, is to approve the naming of the multi-purpose gymnasium at Greer High School for Travis Perry. Is there any comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, 5.03. The recommended motion from the committee of the whole is to approve a lease agreement renewal with the city of Greer. Coming from the committee, does not need a second. Any discussion or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, 5.04. Recommended motion from the committee of the whole does not need a second, is to approve a permanent sanitary sewer right of way and temporary construction easement as requested by REWA at Sue Cleveland Elementary School and Woodmont Middle School. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, 5.05, recommended motion from the committee of the whole, coming from the committee, does not need a second, is to approve a utility easement as requested by the Duke Energy Carolinas LLC at Northwood Middle School. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 5.06. Recommended motion from the committee of the whole does not need a second, is to approve the Upstate Greenways and Trails Alliance, a permanent and perpetual easement and right-of-way at Travelers Rest High School. Any questions or comments? Ms. LaVentas Wells.
I would just like to say I'm really excited about this partnership, and it gives our young students an opportunity to be outdoors and be able to walk to the YMCA going behind Travelers Rest High School. I think this is, if we can get our children out and exercise and enjoy nature, that's what it's all about. They need to breathe fresh, be with friends, and enjoy life. So I'm excited about this easement. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. LaVentas Wells. Ms. Bush.
Yes, same way. I'd like to ditto what Ms. LaVentas Wells said, and how excited that we are up in the Travelers Rest community to be able to have this connection to the Swamp Rabbit Trail. And there's actually a community that's built right around that will benefit from this. There's a housing development there that will kind of adjoin to, and the prospect of many more homes to be built over in that community. And if you've ever driven down that really curvy road to try to get from the Y or those communities out to Main Street and Travelers Rest, it can really be dangerous. And every time I go that way, I always think about when there's people on bikes and people and students that are walking. So we're very excited to have the ability for more children in the community, more community members to be able to be in a safe environment and connect with downtown Travelers Rest. So as soon as that gets done, I invite everybody to come on out and see what we got going on in Travelers Rest.
Thank you, Ms. Bush. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 5.07. Recommended motion coming from the committee of the whole does not need a second, is to approve the members of the CSHAC, the CSHAC as presented. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no, say nay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 5.08, physical education exemption. This is a recommended motion from the administration. Do I have a maker?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve physical education exemption for one student at Wade Hampton High School.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 6.01, committee liaison reports. Do we have any committee or liaison reports? Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Advocacy Committee met today, and just a couple of updates. One is a reminder, the committee is going to be scheduling meetings with our legislative delegation, and rather than having those meetings as being one large meeting of the entire board and the entire legislative delegation, we're going to try to split those up into smaller groups and have them kind of be more regional. So you should be getting a schedule from Dr. Royster and from Julie and myself to just kind of give you an update of when they are, and we would encourage board members to attend the ones that they think is really most appropriate to kind of the area that they represent, so we can kind of try to keep our numbers down. So those probably won't be scheduled until December. The other update is that we had some discussion about resolutions today, and one of the things that came out of it was really a need to kind of revisit some of the resolutions that the board has already passed over the last several years. And so we're going to schedule an opportunity for board members to kind of just go through those resolutions that are currently standing as our current policy positions on issues, and just kind of talk through how those resolutions were passed and maybe give some history to those. So that should be scheduled sometime probably later in October.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Any other committee reports, liaison reports? Hearing none. Next item on the agenda, 7.01, monthly finance report. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. We do not have a formal financial report. Ms. Stack can answer any questions you might have. I don't think she has anything of particular note to bring to your attention tonight either.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? Hearing none. Ms. Stack, you got off light tonight. Okay. No other business for the board. I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Bush.
move we adjourn.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Have a motion in many seconds. All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Meeting has adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Good to see you, Ms. Schumacher. All right.